a cultural vortex of first-in-class categorical storm. It's right now. Men have never been more lonely than we are right now. Men have never waited as long to get married as we are right now.
I want to start right here with you. Your words. Men, you wrote, are in desperate conditions. I want to know why.
Well, the stats are pretty clear with it. You can read these stats and you have different numbers at different sources. But as I see it, the stats are pretty clear. Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women, 3 times more likely to have mental illness than women, and 2 times more likely to have an alcohol or chemical abuse related incident than women. Men are not well.
Why, though? So those stats are really daunting. Is there sociological data that would lead to or anthropological stats that we could point to and look at what's happened over the last 50 years or so to say, we see this trending in this way and we didn't catch it? Like, why do you think those are in place?
Chris, I'm not finding people doing the research as to why this is. I'm finding a lot of people giving pep talks as to how men should get better. I hear a lot of people diagnosing what toxic masculinity is. I don't see a lot of people who are coming up with reasons. I've got a number that comes from my reading, working with, I do a thing called Man Camp. I think we cycled through 30,000 guys or something like that in an intense period of time, and books I've written. So I've got my own theories, but I'm not finding a lot of Harvard-trained people who are looking under the hood on this. Would you like to hear my theories? Is that what you're asking?
That is exactly what I'm asking. Yeah, okay. I want to hear, because here's why, Brian. Yeah. You're a megachurch pastor in Cincinnati. You're making a lot of impact, and I'll just frame it up against Man Camp. You've been spending time, your ears have been to the ground for 20 years plus, and I'm saying you've got some real-time data, if you will. You've got some experiences. You are a man. Like I said, just want your take on that.
Yeah, I think that the changes that are facing men today are greater than any time period in anthropological history. I'm not saying that men have it worse now than ever. Men and women had it worse during the Black Plague. It's things like that. But in terms of a cultural vortex of first-in-class categorical storm, it's right now. Men have never been more lonely than we are right now. Men have never waited as long to get married as we are right now. Men have never been more uneducated relative to women as we are right now. Men have never had to fill certain norms in culture that have never been filled before, ever, until right now. Men have never not needed their physical mass and their physical muscle the way we've been created, like we are right now. Men have never been sort of attacked as being a man more than we are right now. Men have never wrestled with being the one who's the primary caregiver in the family because the woman is the primary bread earner than right now. Men have never been the one who makes less amount of money. Men have never been the one that didn't know how to fix something. Most guys don't know how to fix something. Most guys don't know how to build something. Now here's the thing, Chris. All these things are not inherently bad or inherently evil. I wish my wife made more money than me. That'd be great. I'd buy more motorcycles if she made more money than me. But what I'm saying is, in all of these things, it's a first-in-class experience, and guys aren't equipped to do it. They didn't see their dad do it. They haven't seen their grandfather do it. They're not reading books of the quote-unquote great men in the past who did these things. We are literally fish out of water right now. When stories can be published in journals, as they have, with the headline of, "Do we really need men anymore?" That's an issue. One of the threads of interest to me in those kind of articles and in those thinking, I think, is worth examination. One of the threads is, look, Men have frame built for physical labor. Men have frames built for going and hunting things, killing things. Men are wired for battle. Well, you know what? We don't have to plow fields anymore. We don't have to go kill things anymore. Wars amongst civilizations are fortunately on the demise. So therefore, the role of what a man does, do we really need it anymore? I understand that's a good thing to ask, and I think the answer to that is part of why men are struggling so much. We don't know how to function, most of us anyway, in our current modern construct.
You gave us some really great examples, and we can double click on them in a few minutes. But speaking of like loneliness, failure to launch, these cultural norms that are moving men away from design. But I want to go back to what you were saying regarding first-in-class experience. How did we get here, Brian? And I don't want to assume anything that perhaps your experience would inform more than just my thought process here. But what's your take on the cultural influence away from healthy masculinity and the development of men? In other words, is there a 30,000-foot view that we should spot? Culture, progressivism is influencing to such a degree that what? Like, what's your take on that? How did we get here?
Well, I don't think that there is some mastermind offensive against men. Part of why I don't think that is because I don't want to be a victim. A man shouldn't be a victim. So if someone's sitting around going, "Oh, look what the elite progressives are doing to us," you're going to be a boy. You're going to be a boy who is only a victim. I think if you wanted to say there's a mastermind behind it, as a believer, I would say his name would be Satan. That would be his name. But I'm really hesitant to pin something on the Hollywood ideologues or the elite someplace. I think, Chris, what's just happened is we all know that society at large has gone at breakneck speed over the last 40 years. The level of change that we've experienced in 40 years is unlike any change that anybody else has ever experienced. My grandmother, my wife's grandmother, in her lifetime, she went from a horse and buggy carriage to a man on the moon in her lifetime. That was pretty amazing. And as far as transportation goes, that's a crazy progression. But that's in transportation. Within our culture in the last few decades, 4 decades, we've seen massive change in everything. We've seen massive change in what appropriate sexuality is. We've seen massive change in what a family looks like. We've seen massive change in the basic work week. We've seen massive change in the safety net you should be able to expect from corporate America if you're there. We've seen massive change in the roles of men and women. We've seen massive change with basically having a God in our hand, which is the cell phone. That makes us divine, and it is the center point of our lives. We've seen massive change in terms of the connective tissues that men used to have to give us meaning and substance. That connective tissue is all gone. Softball leagues, gone. Bowling leagues, gone. Elks, gone. Moose Club, gone. There's virtually nothing in the modern American community that actually brings men together. And you start putting all these things, and then you layer on top of it, the first generation that could please themselves sexually because we have on-demand pornography nonstop, and there's always a more titillating image. And by the way, I'm not going to get on my puritanical high horse here and say it's awful that men are masturbating. I'm just saying that if you took the temptations of pornography and fantasization, and you thrust them on Teddy Roosevelt, he may not have done any better. You thrust them on any of the men in the past, they may not have done better. You take just the idea of men used to, in virtually every other sector of our society in the past, they had a field that they worked. They had their own business that they worked.
That's right.
We don't walk away from the end of a day. Any man, virtually any man I know, at least those who are in the white collar profession, we don't walk away at the end of our workday and turn around and go, "Look at that, I did that." Whereas our forefathers could say, "Look at that field, I plowed that. Look at that cabinet. I built that. Look at that car. I stood in the line and did this little piece on the assembly line. I walk away from my work day, Chris, I'm like, my Google Calendar said I did some stuff, but nothing looks different. The male brain, the reason why we're so drawn to pornography is that we have the ability to visualize and have abstract images in our mind seem like they are real. Well, when we can't visualize what we actually did all day, we're left with a void in our soul.
Gosh, Brian, you're dropping gold already. So I want to ask you a few things, and we'll backtrack into the things that you just shared. The first thing I want to ask is, because you gave the example of being able to look at your Google Calendar and what does that actually yield? Talk to me about why busy doesn't mean productive and how we actually make the paradigmatic shift in here so that we can actually begin to reorient the priorities of our daily lives.
Well, those of us who had great families, a great dad, we don't necessarily look at all the time they were around us. We look at the moments they had with us. Now, those key moments have a higher likelihood of happening if they're around us a lot of times, right? But it was the moment of greatness, the moment of great insight that came to us. So when we look at how to have a life of impact, most of us think we just have to be busy. We just have to achieve goals. We have to fill the calendar. We've got to do what's expected. But that doesn't mean it's a life of impact. And so that's our problem. We're just busy, but we don't know what it's actually for. We don't look back. Again, I just mentioned Teddy Roosevelt. We have no idea how many hours a day Teddy Roosevelt worked. We just know the guy had a life of substance because of some things that he said. And I don't think guys are figuring out how to have a life of substance. The best we can do is get everything off our to-do list and have a full calendar. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's what you asked me. Sometimes I talk so long, I don't even know what the question was.
No, it's good. I have no intention of cutting you off because I actually love this sort of organic evolution of the conversation a lot. Earlier you said essentially that mobile devices make us divine. How? What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a number of different ways. First of all, I'm 58 right now. I just turned 58 yesterday. Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday, Brian. Let's go.
So at 58, I'm thinking to myself, when's my run done? You know, when I was 25, I thought the ultimate goal would be to retire when I was 55. That's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. One of the things that separates boys from men is a man wants to work and a boy only plays. Now, I like playing, but I play as the revenge to work. I play to give myself creative ideas to work. God placed us here, and we were here to work long before sin ever entered the world, right? So when I think of myself at 58, having had a goal to retire at 55, I realized I was sold a bill of goods. I just believed something that just wasn't true, and I'm now realizing that I want to go to 70. That's my goal. Let's go to 70 because I want to be productive and I want to have a good impact on the world. And if I'm not engaged in something isn't going to be going well. Now, back to your cell phone idea. Okay. One of the reasons I've thought that it would be really hard for me to retire is every time someone texts me, I'm reminded that I'm important. Every time someone calls me, I'm reminded that I'm important. And that's what our phones do. They tell us we are important. As soon as I retire, I'm not going to get the same number of texts, and I'm not going to realize that I'm important. I'm not going to think they're important. Our phones tell us they're important. Our phones also make us omniscient. We know things that no one ever knew before. Immediately. And here's what's really awful. Do you remember the old days, Chris, when you used to be with some people and used to have a question like, gosh, who was it that won the most Academy Awards? And you go, I think it was Marlon Brando. No, I think, and you'd have this vigorous debate and talking. We don't even have those talks anymore. Just what's the cell phone say? So conversations, natural conversations are just gone and cut out when they were before. When we would be in relationships with one another, you would just sit in waiting rooms. You'd sit in waiting rooms. You'd maybe have a highlight magazine you would read, which would have had all the puzzles filled in 5 times over, all the missing words. But you would sit in a waiting room and you would like look at somebody. You would start talking to somebody. You would be in a conversation with people and you would have the ability to wait 4 minutes until you said anything. Now, if that happens, we immediately pull out our phone. Oh, I'm not including this conversation for 4 minutes. I better start looking at our phone. So our phone has cut us off from relationships. We don't know how to talk with people anymore. I go into Division I universities where I go to speak to their fraternities. They ask me to come and speak. And I tell those guys, I say, look, dudes, you could have any woman on this campus that you want. All you have to do is talk to them because no one talks to them. Guys will text them because they don't have the guts to actually talk to them. But dudes, I'm telling you, seriously, all you have to do is talk to a girl and she will be blown away because our phones have made it easy for young males to think they're talking by texting, and it's just not the same. We've lost the ability as young males to actually talk to women. This hasn't been a problem until it has in the last 20 years. So the changes that are here aren't like my grandmother, the change of how she got down to the grocery store. The changes that are here are just how we interact with other human beings. We don't know how to do it anymore, which is why we're 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women, 3 times more likely to have mental illness, 2 times more likely to be getting wasted. These changes do not bode well for us. And I don't hear people talking about these or giving people an alternative.
Brian, I love this. You are threading all of this together through for us. And what I heard you say in a way is these various stimuli are giving us the illusion of control, the illusion of connection, the illusion of maturity, the illusion of development. And I want to connect
the illusion of importance as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll add that to the list. So the illusion
of power.
Okay. What else?
I think you got it on all those things.
Okay, then. Well, let's connect this to what you said then earlier. I want to talk about the pornification of society because you were talking about our increased access to pornography, etc. Talk about managing our appetite and how real men have the character and integrity and self-control to manage their appetite. And then I want to actually connect this then to where we began, boys to men, loneliness and failure to launch.
I don't think that managing, with all due respect, Chris, I don't think that managing our appetite is the tip of the spear.
Okay. Drive, yeah.
I think that, like for instance, back in the 90s, the big thing with Promise Keepers was were men accountability groups. I'm not a fan of men's accountability groups. No, I'm a man and I have accountability in my life. But I swore off a long time ago a bunch of guys coming together and trying to keep themselves morally pure. Men's accountability groups became nothing more than anti-groups. Oh, did you? Oh, I did. Oh, gosh. You can't. Well, what can I do? Can I call you every night? Can I do? Oh, guys, I did it again. And it would just evolve into this. And to be clear, I'm against. I am. But the problem, the genesis of the problem isn't that pornography is on demand. The genesis of the problem isn't that men aren't able to manage their appetites. The genesis of the problem is there's no other alternative use for a man's imagination. There's no other alternative hobby that a man has. Well, you show me a guy who's struggling with pornography. When I say struggling, I'm not talking about you're in a hotel room for the first time in 3 months and you succumb. I'm talking to a guy that's his outlet, right? I'm talking about a guy who, if you talk to sex therapists will tell you their most growing clientele are men in their 20s who can't perform for their girlfriends. because the pressure on them with all the pornos that they've seen, they can't measure up. Anyway, the people who are having a hard time with pornography don't have a life-giving hobby. And because they don't have a life-giving hobby, they also don't have life-giving friendships. This is how men make friends. We don't make friends by going to church and sitting beside somebody and singing, which is why at least 70% of every church is filled with women. Men make friends by doing things alongside some other guy, and then what do you know? We actually become their friend. So the average guy, as I said earlier, is not in a athletic league or softball league or bowling league. The average guy is not, like right now I'm rehabbing a 1978 CJ7. It's fun. It's great. It's great. And I love my cell phone because I can find anything I need on YouTube to tell me what to do. It's really, really cool. It's one of the great things for cell phones, right? But I've gotten 2 new friendships out of it because I've gotten into pickles with things that I had 2 guys that said, hey, I'm a welder. Another guy said, hey, I restored a GTO recently. If you run into any issues, let me know. What do you know? I've ran into issues I can't figure out on my own. They've come over to my garage, and we have a relationship. We talk. We have a couple of beers with one another. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Most guys don't have a hobby that enables them to find other guys. They withdraw by themselves to the couch when their wife goes up to bed early, and they do porn or whatever. And again, I'm not pro porn. I'm not at all. But let's back up. There's nothing that he's doing that's gathering his affections other than pornography. And don't give me this crap of, well, his identity is a son of God. That's ridiculous. Come on. Pull your head out of your rear end and stop giving your spiritual fantasies. It's like telling my kid, look, your identity is a tome. Yeah, that's right. My kid's identity was a tome, and every parent knows that's not good enough. They're a tome, and they're an athlete, or they're a tome, and they're a musician, and they're a geek, or whatever. We need things to put our hands around. So simply saying your identity is as a son of God, that's a good place to start. That's the most important thing. But it's not good enough. I am a son of God, and Brian Tome, I do hard things. That's my identity. I do hard things. Sometimes those things are, I hunt, and I hunt 13 miles a day with 50 pounds on my back, and I haul out an elk if I can find one or kill one. Sometimes I do hard days because I start a church and I start other nonprofits because I do hard things, and I do hard things like I take a CJ7 and I try. That's kind of, I do hard things, and I have activities that line up with that. As a guy, you got to know what your identity is beyond your spiritual identity. What is it you do? What is it you're equipped to do? And are you doing that? That's what gives your life meaning and purpose. That's what you can lean on instead of just frittering away in your mind with porn or with streaming, binge watching every night, or with gamifying everything in your life.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Thank you for all of that.
You say wow to everybody, Chris. Come on.
No, I do not.
Don't stop trying to make me feel all smart.
No, I'm just thankful for this level of honesty, Brian, because I think it's refreshing, if I'm being honest with you. I am curious about this. So if we were to just kind of poke on porn as an issue, is it boredom? So like connected to a lack of hobbies, a lack of purpose, a lack of identity. Is it that we are living isolated lives and as such are bored and we don't know what to do with that? I'm not blaming it on that because we need to exercise character, integrity, self-control, etc. I'm just saying, Are men just bored? What do you think?
Well, obviously, there's plenty of people who know more about porn than I do. Thankfully, a lot of people know more about porn than I do. There's a lot of people who are more into the psychological effects of it and all that stuff. But I just say this, man. Again, I've worked with tens of thousands of dudes in different settings over the last. I don't know somebody who has a porn problem who isn't simultaneously bored. I don't know a single person.
That's what I was getting at. Right, that's what I was getting at. I don't know a single person. And even if they have a slam and bored, doesn't mean they don't work 60 hours a week. You can work 60 hours a week and still not have something capturing your imagination, and porn is the thing that's capturing your imagination. There's a lack of a creative spark, a lack of just a healthy hobby, a healthy passion, and therefore we fall into porn. If you find something that's capturing your imagination, that's good. Like
Yeah, and mine's cycle, Chris. Mine's cycle. I get fixated on various things. Like I'll get fixated on adventure motorcycling, everything from routes I want to take to gear I want to buy, and then I fixate on hunting, and I fixate on CJ7, and I fixate. I just and I look at these things, and I tell my wife, I said, honey, I know it seems like I'm compulsive, but this is actually very safe for you, because as soon as I stop having my imagination captured by these potential avocations, I'm more prone to have some other woman capture my heart, or pornography capture my heart.
Okay, so connect this to where we started, loneliness and failure to launch.
Yeah. If we learn anything from history, it's that we don't learn anything from history, right? The things I'm saying here right now, I don't know if they are true. Someone from Stanford hasn't run the data and done test tube analysis and all that I'm saying from the last 20 years, right? But what I know from history is all of these things are true. Let's talk about adolescence. The term adolescence didn't actually start getting used until about 1900. For all of human history, as soon as you could have an erection and an ejaculation, you were a man. Everybody in the village said, oh, we expect something different from you. We expect you to actually have a woman and have population and add to our numbers. Now, we can debate all we want whether or not that was realistic for a 14-year-old. I'm just telling you that's all of human history. All of human history. And now here we are in our enlightened age, when we're breaking from the norms of manhood, and we're telling our 14-year-olds, you're just screwed up. You're just an adolescent. In fact, adolescence gone from 14 to 15 to 16, 14 to 25 is now adolescence. And so guys are still now 35 and trying to find themselves. Like, no one ever tried to find themselves. No man in any corner of the globe in any time period ever had to find themselves, because they lived in a culture that demanded things of them. Hard things, difficult things, things that stretched them. And you were expected to make a contribution to the community. And if you didn't make your contribution, you went hungry and you couldn't be a victim. But now today, we're just coddling men, and we're not allowing them to experiment with things. We're looking at some of our passions that we have as men and trying to explain them away as toxic or some such thing. And I'm saying that we need to get back to a higher level of expectation for men and give men a higher level of freedom and responsibility that I think, quite frankly, our current society is willing to give us.
Yeah, okay, then the transition from boyhood to manhood, as you said, isn't marked by age, but by what?
Correct. There are 15-year-old men and there are 45-year-old boys. It doesn't have to do with age. What I did to write the book, 5 Marks for Man, and it came out, Chris, when I had my son. My son, when he was born, they put him on a little changing table, and I went over to hold his hand. And I'm adopted. So at that point in my life, that was only the second person I ever saw that had my DNA, shared my DNA. The first was my oldest daughter. The second was my son, Jake. Went over, held his hand, and he proceeded to send a stream of urine up in the air that hit my arm and dribbled all the way down. And I thought to myself, yeah, this could be an omen. I got to get a hold of this little guy, or he's going to all over me just like I was all over my dad. My dad didn't have a rule, never had a rule I didn't break. He never had a car I didn't wreck. He never had a curfew I didn't violate. He never had money around the house I didn't steal for a poker game. I was just horrible. Part of the backlash, Chris, that we have against masculinity is because men are very dangerous and we aren't being raised well. When you got a Chihuahua or a wiener dog, you can be very lax with how you raise them, but it's not going to hurt anybody. Even if they bite somebody, it's not going to hurt them. When you have a larger dog, the stakes are much higher. Someone could get hurt if you don't train them properly. We're not training our younger males properly and expecting them to elevate their game. And then when they get to be 45 years old with a level of power in corporate America, surprise, surprise, they're taking advantage of women. The truth of the matter is they weren't raised right decades ago. It's not that there's something wrong with men. It's wrong with our training methods with men when they're young males. So with my son, I realized I got to do something different with him. So I became a student of masculinity. And it didn't just mean I read every book I could on masculinity, whether it was Robert Bly, who was the kind of first secular author who started talking about this back in the 70s or 80s, or Steve Farrar or Stu Weber, some of these people who were around with the Promise Keepers movement. I started reading books. I started remembering stories in the Bible. I started looking at people who I respected from history, big reader of biographies, looking at people who've had an influence on my life. And I just said, what are the things that cause us to universally respect these people? Those are the things that are what a man is. And there's 5 of them. So I tried to build into my son these 5 things, and other men I work with. These are the 5 pressure points to your life. These are the 5 things that don't just define whether you're a boy or a man. These are the things that you do when you want to be manly.
Go for it. Yeah, take us there. Take us right to the 5 then.
Okay. So brief overview of them, and then if you want to dig deeper into them, you can. These aren't necessarily numerical order. You have all 5 of them or you don't. And we all have problems. I find that all of us have probably an Achilles heel in one of them. But if you're a man, you'll notice it's an Achilles heel. You say, I don't like that. I don't like it. One is men have vision and boys live day to day. Boys just want an easy day. They want a comfortable day. A man has a vision. A vision is a picture you have of the future that what separates you from that picture is time and difficulty. Whatever that vision is, doesn't matter what it is. If you're a man, you're going towards it. And that vision could change very frequently. It could be anything. It could be a vision to be the first person in my family to stay married my whole life, vision to get sober, a vision to have a college education, a vision to start a business, a vision to pay for my grandchildren's college education, whatever it is. It's going to take time. It's going to take difficulty. A man has vision. 2, a man works and a boy plays. I think we just talked about that one. Yeah, man, where I don't need no more need to be said that at this point. 3, a man is a protector and a boy is a predator. The Carnegie Hero Foundation did a study on 100 years worth of data and found out with all of the heroes who were what they called passerby heroes. That is someone who's getting mugged, someone who's getting held up, and someone steps in and stops them. 90% of the time, they're men. And instantly, 1 out of 5 times they lose their life. That is a dream death for every man. Every man says, man, I would love to die a hero. And what's a hero? You protect somebody. You lay your life down for somebody. Men are protectors. If we're not physical protectors, we protect people financially. We have savings so that we can help people in a bind. We protect people in terms of wisdom. We give them our wisdom. And a boy just takes. He's a predator. Takes. Well, she said I could. You know, how many women lose their virginity because they seem to say it's okay, but a boy doesn't think about her future, doesn't think about her future husband. He just takes. 4. Fourth one is a man. Man is a, gosh, I gave you 4. That's 4, right? Is that 3 or 4?
This is 4.
This is 4.
Yep.
Okay. A man takes a minority position, and a boy has to be in the majority. So when you're a man, you're like a falcon versus a pigeon. Cincinnati used to have a pigeon problem until falcons were introduced, and there's a few families of falcons in the skyscrapers of Cincinnati that have decimated the pigeon population. It's awesome. It's wonderful. Boys are like pigeons. They're always in the majority. They're all over the place. They make a lot of noise. They sweep in. They're always bottom feeders. When they leave, there's a lot of poop they've left everywhere. Men are like falcons. We hover above it, and we're never like in a massive, massive herd. But toe to toe, a man always takes down a boy. And we're used to being in the minority. Men who are men, people who I vote for, they never win elections because my morals are in the minority. You get me talking about sexuality, I will always be called a hater because I understand how God's ordained sexuality, and I will be in the minority. When I go into my financial manager and he takes a look at my finances, I always ask, is there anything different about how I manage my money versus somebody who makes the same amount of money I do, but they're an atheist? What's the difference? If I'm just doing what everybody else is doing, I'm a boy. So a man just gets used to being in the minority. Fifth, a man is a team player and a boy wants to be MVP. Boy wants to be all-time quarterback. A boy wants to get all the personal trophies. A man is a team player. This is why young men we're not asking women out. We're not talking about to women. We talked about that earlier. And therefore, they're not getting married. We're getting married later and later and later. Why is that? Because we have a higher percentage of males in America who are boys than men at any other time. And we don't value marriage. Marriage is the greatest team a man will ever be on. Your spouse, if you choose right, she will double the impact of your life. More than double the impact of your life. Men get this. They're up for long-term commitments. Men at work are up for sharing credit with the team. Men think in terms of a team. If Jesus came and he operated a team with 12 disciples, he's always existed in team. That is the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, the Holy Spirit. And men embrace team, boys don't. So those are the 5 push points and the things that define and separate men from boys.
Yeah, folks, I'm just going to take a quick time out and say in the show notes at wintoday.tv, you can get a copy of The 5 Marks of a Man, as well as Brian's tactical guide. Go there now, wintoday.tv. Links in the show notes. But Brian, I want to spring off of that. And it's interesting. You had mentioned delayed marriage. I think that's what I would put that under the umbrella of failure to launch. So you would ask me about that earlier.
Yeah, right.
I would sort of put delayed marriage in that as well. I want to ask this. What does it take to harness the power of focus then in our lives as men? Okay, if you've given us these 5 benchmarks, I'd like to suggest executing on and staying consistent in them requires focus.
Yeah.
What's it take?
That's a great topic, and I don't think anyone's figured it out. I think this would go back to, when you ask these questions, if you want to, we would pin all these things back to the 5 marks, because your focus comes back to it. So for you to increase in focus, you're going to have to take a minority position, and you're going to have to be less active on social media. You just can't do the average social media thing and build your life. You're just going to get jealous that somebody else is doing things that you're not doing. And it's taking time away from you focusing on what you want to focus on. So we've got to start, the average guy, let's not talk about men, okay? It's just the average American, okay? The average American just doesn't have the attention span we used to have. And so you're going to have to start filling your mind with different things and doing things with their free time. One of the things to do is spend 5 minutes every day, minimum, as start, in silence, like nothing. You could meditate if you want. You could pray if you want. You could just sit there. I encourage you, just sit there. Most people cannot do that. It's like scratching a chalkboard with nails, right? But if you can do it for 5 minutes, you can build up. And what you're doing is you're increasing your capacity to focus. And most of us are not interested in focusing at all. We just want to consume as much as we possibly can. And no level of consumption that you take will create a great life. No level of consumption will ever create a great life. It's not what you consume that creates a great life. It's what you give. It's what you create that creates a great life. Simply consuming content never does it. I could consume nothing else, and I've learned everything I need to learn in order to have a successful life. I just need to do what I already know. I don't need more information.
Right. Yeah, I want to pull the thread on this just a bit more, because I'd love for you to teach us strategically then how to better seize our time. You talked about this in the book, and I highlighted this, I underlined it, I thought this is critical. How to better seize our time based on the priorities of what we feel called to do. It's huge.
It is big. I think, Chris, I think that's an age-gated question. I think that your age as a man and your experience as a man will cause you to have a different answer there. I think when you are younger, you need to be giving yourself you need to be a team player in coming under other people and doing what they tell you. Because you think you're good at something, but you have no idea. You're 21. You have no idea how good you are. You have no idea what you're good at. I know what you want to be good at. You want to be good at making money. You want to be good at commanding a room. You want to be good at having the best idea in meeting. You want that, but you have no idea if you're good at any of that stuff at 21. The only way you know what you're good at, naturally good at, is if you try a lot of things, which normally comes by somebody telling you what they need you to do. Because you won't choose those on your own. No one goes, I need to try a lot of things and branch out. No, we focus on because this is the thing I want to do. So you need to be in an organization or under some people who simply tell you what to do and you just do it. And then in the midst of that, like years later, and this is very countercultural, Chris. I meet with guys who are in their late 20s who are just stressed out that they're not having an impact on the world, stressed out that, that they're not leading things the way they should. And what they're basically saying is, I'm not where other people are, or I don't think that I'm where other people are. And that's just a lie. Again, that goes back to our phone and how our phone is really hurting us. We're judging ourselves on so many people we couldn't before. Like when I was in my late 20s, there was only like 5 people who I knew who were anywhere close to what I was, and so I could maybe gauge myself against them. That's it. That wasn't hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I'm hearing of or knowing of, right? So anyway, early in your life as a man, you've got to be a team player and you've got to figure out who you are. What is your identity as the things that God has given you and learning what those are. And then as you progress, you get to where I am right now to have a powerful life. Then it gets to be, I know what I do and I need to just do those things, period. Only those things. You can't make that decision when you're 29. Because you still don't know what those things are. You still got to earn your stripes. But when you get, later in life, that's when you say, no, this is just what I do, and I've earned the right to focus my life in this area and have other people do everything else.
You talked about how boys want to be MVP, men are team players, and I want to nuance this a bit. How do we break, Brian, the independent spirit that is so rampant in culture today? Because the goal, as you talked about in the book, is interdependence.
Yeah, that's I think we need to understand this is how the spiritual world differs from the physical world, right? In the physical world, we go from dependence, I'm dependent on my parents, to independence, I can take care of myself. And then at the end of life, whether we like it or not, we go back to dependence. We're wearing our depends, and someone's making our decisions for us, right? But the goal is always independence. In the spiritual world, the goal is dependence. I'm born independent. I am sinful by nature, totally depraved, as my theological camp would say. And as I spiritually mature, I become more dependent on God. And so the plight of a godly man is going to look a bit different than it is the guy who just wants to make his mark in the world. I want guys to become godly men, which means we've got to start making decisions that mean I'm dependent on God. So for me, what that looks like is I'm 58 years old, and many guys my age are trying to wind down. They're trying to, get out of ministry, get out of a vocation, and enjoy their golden years. Man, I've been enjoying my 50s the heck. I've been enjoying the heck out of my 40s. I don't need to stop to enjoy them. And so I'm making decisions right now that are still causing me to be dependent on God, and it's freaking me out. I'm going to take a prayer walk tomorrow afternoon on a piece of property that extends our man camp, or we're going to extend man camp, or we're going to buy a whole new property altogether. And so there's a property of we have 425 acres right now. We're looking to buy another 335, or else we're going to move to one of these other 2 properties, 700 acres, something like that. Well, it's incredible, except that it costs millions of dollars, and we don't have millions of dollars in the bank. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to walk around the property 7 times, which is a tradition of mine when I go. We acquire property, and I'm going to ask God to give us favor. And I have no idea where the multiple millions of dollars comes. We don't have it in the bank. But I'm going to put myself to being dependent on God for him giving us answers and figuring that out. I don't want to do that, Chris. At this point in my life, I just only want to do what I have the resources for. But as a man, I can't do that. I've got to put myself still dependent on God. In fact, at my age and my spiritual maturity level, I should be more willing to do that than a 29-year-old because I should be more spiritually qualified. Instead, I'm finding men who are my age who are just looking towards the finish line instead of putting their spiritual maturity into play. I don't even remember what the question you asked me. That's a sign I'm getting old. I can't remember what your question was.
No,
I'm just babbling here. I'm just babbling like an old man. What did you ask me? What did you say? Gosh, please get me some Depends. Get me some Metamucil. I'm just blabbing on like an old man who can't remember his train of thought.
Breaking the independent spirit and becoming more interdependent. And I think Brian, you nailed it. And this is the humility aspect of manhood, sustainability, longevity. Because here's the macro narrative I'm sort of forming in my mind is one of the things that you're describing is that a godly man is committed to play the long game, as he even talked about in the book. And there's a sustainability, there's a longevity, there's a faith aspect, there's a humility aspect, and all of those things coexist together. And I just think it's really important. There's an aspect I want to touch on here as we're beginning the descent of this conversation to land this plane. How can men become more affectionate? Because I want to ask two questions about how to interact with the woman in our life.
Man, that's a big one. And it goes against this idea of toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. No one's still defined that for me, But if we're going to say toxic masculinity is thinking you have to shoot guns and have a pickup truck to be a man, I'd say, yeah, that's probably toxic masculinity. Not having guns and having a truck is toxic masculinity because I have those. But if toxic masculinity is you have to do these stereotypical man things to be a man, yeah, I would say that's toxic. I'll tell you another one. Another one is the strong silent type. The strong silent type is a toxic male. If we mean by strong and silent, we're not giving affection and affirmation to others, I'm sorry, that's toxic. In that case, strong and silent is just introverted and afraid to go out of my shell to bless somebody else. We need to, this is a whole nother topic, man. Boys to men is one thing. Boys to men to patriarch is a whole nother discussion.
Jeez.
A patriarch is interested in future generations. A patriarch has people who he hasn't even met who remember his life because of the stories. And they say, Grandpa did this, X, Y, Z, and therefore our family is like this. The only way you ever get to be a patriarch is if you give affirmation and affection to people. People are starved for it. And this is the powerful thing about a man. Affection and affirmation from a man, for whatever reason, and I don't like it, it seems to be more potent than when it comes from a woman. Don't stone me over this. I'll just ask all of your listeners, what words of hurt have done more damage? Those that your mother gave you or those that your father gave you? What words of affirmation do you think more frequently of? Those that your mom gave you or those that your dad gave you? Who makes you most bitter that you didn't get their affirmation and affection? Your mom or your dad? The question of all those things is your father. I don't like it. I don't like that I have power in my words in my family. I don't like it. It just is what it is. So therefore, as men, one of the best blessings we can give to people around us is to grow comfortable giving people a hug. Grow comfortable saying to them, hey, I saw what you did the other day. That's great. Saying to somebody, one of the things I admire about you is I admire how when I talk to you, you always look at me in the eye and you never look over my shoulder to see if there's somebody else who's more interesting than me. When a guy can say those kind of things to people around them, give them a hug, it's powerful, man. People want to be around that person. And there's not a lot of guys who have reached that level of self-awareness and emotional connection.
It makes me think of Proverbs 13:22, folks. The Bible says, a righteous man, a good man, leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And it's so good, right?
Yeah, and we think of that book and we think of that passage as only financial. I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I'm fine to leave my kids a financial inheritance, I'm fine, but I don't think that's the main thing that verse is talking about. Talking about a spiritual inheritance. What are you leaving for your kids spiritually? I know plenty of people who are financially rich, but they are spiritually poor. They don't have friends. They don't have a family that just falls all over them. They don't. I remember I have we call it a speaker room. It's basically a green room. And after I was done preaching, this was years ago, and I went in there, and there was another guy who was in there with me. And my kids came in, and my wife came in. At that point, my kids were like late teens, and their teenage years, and maybe one of them was 20 or something like that. And they just came in to see me, and we were talking and laughing. And the guys with me said, "Man, you are a rich man." At the time, I thought, "What are you talking about, dude? I don't have money in the bank here. I don't know how I'm getting my kids through college. I'm driving ratty cars." I thought that, but then I thought, wow, that's really right. I am rich. The evil one has stolen from us the meaning of rich, and us as men, we're only going after financial riches. Many of us, we're not going after family riches, relational riches, emotional depth.
Yeah, that's good. We'll land here, Brian, today. What a conversation. Men think about a woman's tomorrow. I love that. Tell me more.
Well, if I told you more, then I would be acting that way more often to my wife, and then my wife would call me out on it. So I might have blabbed a long time with all of our answers, but please do not look at me as the ultimate example of God's gift to building into people emotionally. I've gotten better, but I'm not there yet. And my wife and I have gone through a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. Someday, maybe we'll be able to talk about it. But I think the best thing I've done with my wife and the best thing she's done with me is stay and be faithful. Just stay and be faithful. Faithfulness is a word that is out of vogue. Everyone's deconstructing. They're not deconstructing. They're becoming unfaithful. You got baptized. You got baptized.
Brian Tome.
You swore allegiance to Jesus. But now you're deconstructing, and now you found some. Well, you call it deconstructing. No, you're unfaithful. You're unfaithful. Brian. And the people who have great lives are faithful.
Wow. Yeah, okay, there's the hammer, and it just dropped. It's so good. Brian, before I let you go, I want to ask you this because I'm a big avid reader, and you had mentioned when we were talking about how men aren't being raised well, you were talking about some top biographies and historical figures.
Yeah.
Who are a few of those? What are some top biographies that you've read that you would encourage all of us to just get a hold of? I love history. We can learn from history and historical figures.
Yeah, that's great. My favorite biography of all time is David McCullough's Truman. I find that fascinating. I would put number 2, the most recent biography, and the author escapes me because as you start reading on a Kindle, which I read on a Kindle, you forget names and authors' names. But the most recent biography on General Grant, I would put that one there. Yeah, those are the two that immediately come to mind.
Sweet. The reason why, Ryan, is the folks here love to get a hold of ancillary resources. So folks, again, at wintoday.tv, not only will I put links to the 5 marks of a man with the tactical guide, I'll put links to those biographies. I'll find that General Grant biography and throw that in the show notes. But Brian, I got to get you out of here. I want to respect your time, but man, thank you for being here. This has been a riveting conversation. Anything else before we land this thing?
No, Chris, I'm thankful. You've done just a great job at the interview.
Thanks,
I've done my share of podcasts, and I always wish that the other person would have asked me more questions. And so I kind of regret right now, I didn't ask you many questions. I just went on with long answers to your questions. So I hope I was a good podcast guest for you. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and thanks for asking really deep, penetrating questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's the passion of my life, so I appreciate your time today.
It's obvious.